Hey everyone, welcome to this session. Get started with Copilot Actions for developers. Most sexy slide of the day, as usual, forward-looking statement: buy the product for what it is today, not for what it will be tomorrow. With that said, I would like to thank you for being here. Thank you for the feedback we are getting on Einstein Copilot. It's really helping us to drive what are the next innovation we are going to bring on this product, and so thank you for being here. In terms of who you have in front of you, so I'm Gary Brandelaire, product manager on Einstein Copilot, and then Aditya is joining me.
Hey everyone, Aditya. I'm a developer advocate with Salesforce, and I'm joining Gary today to talk to you about the wonderful Copilot. Did you all get a chance to try it out in the activations, the workshops? How are you liking it so far? Perfect.
Oh, good. That's nice. So you might know this slide. I'll still go through it because some people might not know. So what we did essentially when we built this product, we really wanted to have an AI assistant that is in the flow of work. That's number one. So getting you more productive as salespeople, marketers, service agent, and so on. The second thing there is also it's important to keep in mind is that the architecture is unique and one and only architecture for all the different clouds. So marketing, service, sales, it's the same Copilot architecture, which is very critical for us. The second part here is conversational UI, of course, and conversational AI, but safely. So we go through the Einstein trust layer. We make sure that when you ask something to our Copilot, it will be grounded in Salesforce data, and you'll get relevant answers out of the Copilot. And third, and that's the most important for today, and I think that's the one part that's exciting me the most, is really building on top of Copilot, using Copilot custom actions, so you can build your own actions inside the Copilot directly, which is pretty crazy to see, and we'll get a demo from Aditya. In terms of the architecture itself, so you have Hyperforce, public infrastructure, helping you to deploy and scale your own solution. On top of that, we are putting data cloud, so helping you to bring all the data in. That's going to be a solid foundation of data to help you to actually use the LLM against it. And then after that, we went for model agility. That was very important for us because we were thinking that there is not going to be one LLM beating all of them. It's going to be a mix and match. Probably you'll see that, hey, for emails, I want to use this LLM. For actually the Copilot Brain, we use another LLM, and so on and so on. And so that is what we think is going to happen on the market, and that's why we are providing out-of-the-box access to different LLMs directly in Salesforce, plus we allow you to bring your own LLM. And on top of that, you have the Einstein trust layer. That was kind of the main feedback we got 1 year ago, where like many companies wanted to try LLMs, but they were like, I might leak data. I'm not sure if I can do this, if it's compliant with my policies and so on internally. So now we have the Einstein trust layer, allowing you to actually use these LLM in a very safe fashion. And on top of that, we built the Einstein One Studio layer. And so at that stage, what you have there is Prompt Builder, Model Builder, Copilot Builder. What's pretty cool with this is that you can configure the Copilot with these different tools. But what's even better is that if you, for example, bring a model with Model Builder, you can then use it to power one of the prompt templates that you build with Prompt Builder. And at that stage, you can reuse that prompt template inside Copilot as an action. So all these tools are really interlinked. And of course, all this also is linked to our usual workflows automation like Flow, Apex, and so on. So this is really important. Like we are trying to keep the power of the platform, continue to interconnect everything so that you can reuse what you have built and also have new tools to build further. On top of that, we have added, of course, Einstein Copilot. And Einstein Copilot is, as I was saying, one single Copilot powering the different clouds. So we have Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing. All of them are going to use the same architecture. In terms of how Copilot is working, it's actually pretty simple to explain, which is it's starting with a conversation. So you are going to ask, hey, Copilot, can you write an email for me, for example? There are a couple of actions that we are supporting. Here, this use case is an email. And I'm going to ask that to the Copilot. And the Copilot has a brain, if we can call it like this. It's a planner. And this planner will define basically what are the actions it should take to reply to you. Here you have a couple of examples of actions. Identify a record would be one, and then draft an email would be a second action. So the planner is going to think of, for writing an email for you, what should I do? What are the actions I need to take? At that stage, once it has selected the action, it will then execute the action. And so the actions can be, as I was saying, standard or custom. And of course, all this is grounded on data that you have in your CRM. So this is very important because if you would ask, hey, can you create an email to Alex Mitchell about our new sustainability program, probably like if you do that outside of Salesforce, well, you will get an email that is pretty basic. But if you ground it with data, if you actually feed that data into the LLM in the prompt that you are giving, you are going to get a much better output. And that's what you are going to get there. You are going to get an output there that is the email itself. And what's important as well, you have this arrow there coming from outcome to execution. This is important because as you can see, the plan there was identify record, draft email. So the identify record action, the output of that action is going to be the input of the next action. And so you can have a sequence of actions that the planner is going to run through, take the input, take the output, and then reshuffle this over and over to give you an outcome that you were asking for. All that, of course, built on the Einstein Trust Layer. So even the planner and the execution, both of them are going through our Einstein Trust Layer so that we are coding the LLM in a very safe fashion. In terms of what can you put in the Copilot, well, you have standard actions that are going to be shipped by us as Salesforce. I'm working on the platform team, so I'm actually working on the Copilot itself and the platform actions. And then there's going to be our clouds as well, our cloud PMs and teams building actions that are dedicated to the different clouds. What's a little bit cool to see as well here is that some of the platform actions, like for example summarization, will be also automatically tweaked to the cloud use case. So an example of that is if you summarize the opportunity object, we are using a different prompt template, a different way of summarizing that opportunity, that if you go and summarize a case. So it's the same action, but behind the scene, we are doing some routing so that based on the different use case, we are applying different technologies. Of course, there's going also to be some actions that are going to be dedicated to a cloud, like, for example, generating a Sales Cloud plan, a sales plan to close your deal. That will be an action dedicated for Sales Cloud. And on top of that, Aditya will speak about that just after, there will be also custom action that you can create yourself. The set of standard actions that we are shipping right now, we have search, summarize, draft and revise, knowledge, update, and the coolest of all coming soon. So what I mean by this is that basically you can search right now your CRM, you can summarize records, and actually it's working as well with custom objects, so you can summarize case, opportunities, leads, and whichever object you want. You can write emails and revise them, so you could say, hey, write an email and make it shorter, and so it's going to have a conversation with you to get to an email that is valuable for you to send. Knowledge is more about, you might have already a lot of knowledge article. Well, you can bring all these knowledge articles together. So for example, if you ask a question, it might go in 2-3 different knowledge articles and reshuffle them and write an answer for you that is based on your knowledge article database. Update is just updated the records. And then coming soon, basically what we are doing there is that we are literally working with every cloud at Salesforce to build more and more action standards so that we can help you to get live faster. And you'll get these actions on a monthly basis. We are going to update pretty often, actually, Einstein Copilot. And then with that, Aditya is going to speak about custom action, that this is what you are going to use right now as developers.
All right, so in order to build custom actions, you need not learn a new programming language. You can actually leverage the tools that you've been using day in, day out, and you've spent a lot of years perfecting. So out of which you now have flows and Apex, which you're using already right now. So if you want to use a flow, you can plug in any of your auto-launched flows into Copilot Actions. If you're using Apex, you can plug in your invocable methods into Copilot Actions. And we've introduced prompt templates pretty recently, and you can use them in Copilot Actions as well. So the example that Gary has just given, where you want to summarize a record. Let's say it's a standard action, it summarizes a case for you. But for your business use case, what if you wanted the summary to include more data? What if you ground it in data cloud data? What if you want that to be customized? That's where you're going to create a custom prompt template and feed it into Copilot. And that's not the only use case for prompt templates. I'm going to show you a different use case as well. But overall, these are the 3 things that are available right now. External services as Copilot Actions is coming really soon. It's not available right now, but we are developers. We need a workaround for everything. So external services can be invoked from flows. So you can create a flow that invokes an external service, and the flow itself can be used as a Copilot action. So really, the options are all out there. Just mix and match to solve your own use case. And today, we are going to look at a demo in order to see what Copilot is, how do you create custom actions, what are the different use cases, and let's go forward. So right now, we are in the Dreamhouse sample application. And this is something that we are shipping since some time. All of you who have been working on Trailhead have worked with Dreamhouse before. So it's a sample app that lets you manage properties. And if you remember from the slides, Copilot is something that spans across all the different apps that you have, whether it is standard or custom. So here we have a custom Dreamhouse app. And in order to access Copilot, all you need to do is click on the small Einstein icon on the top corner, and that's going to open up the chat panel for you. And then you can start having any conversation. So for example, here I'm going to ask a very customized question that is related to my own use case, where I say, how many properties are sold or closed this month? So what's going to happen behind the scenes is that Copilot is going to understand what I'm trying to do here. It's going to figure out the intent of my question. Based on the intent that it has identified, it's going to put together a plan, and this plan is going to be a set of actions that it executes in the background. Once executed, it's going to give the result back to me, and you can see, because I asked it for a number, it just gave me a number, and it matches with the number of closed properties that are there. Now, I can give a different prompt here and say, show me the one that was most recently closed. Now, what's important here is, in my prompt, I haven't told that show me the property that was most recently closed. I just said show me the one. But it knows I'm looking at properties from the context it has. So it's going to take that context into perspective, and then it's going to show me that record. And because it's a record, we are showing it in a card. And I'm sure by this time you have questions around, can we customize this card? At the moment, no, but soon you will be able to. And the maximum number of fields that you can show in this card is going to be 5. Right, Gary?
That's correct.
Perfect. So now, of course, you can keep chatting with it, like you can say summarize this record, and it's going to summarize it. But let me tweak the prompt a little bit and ask it to summarize a different property. In this case, I'm asking it to summarize the waterfront property. The thing is, if you look at the list view, there are 2 properties with the name waterfront. Now, when Einstein is trying to analyze how to summarize this property, it comes across 2 properties with the same name, so it doesn't know what to do. So what it's going to do is it's going to ask you to solve that ambiguity. So this is what we call a collector prompt or an disambiguation prompt. So that's the technical name, but essentially it's going to get all this information before it's going to go back and take an action. So here I choose whatever property that I want, and I click on submit. Now it has all the information it needs, and it's going to summarize this record for me. In just a bit, you're going to see the summary. But until now, what I've shown you is 3 different prompts which return 3 different types of results. So the first one was just a simple text. The next one was a card. And now it's going to be rich text. It has links and stuff. So there are different kinds of outputs that we show, output UIs that we show, depending on what is being returned from your actions. Now, all of this is fine. All of this is out of the box. I haven't done anything to get this done. I just enabled Copilot, and this is all available to me. Now, how do I customize Copilot? Now, it's just like you would customize any other thing in Salesforce. You would go to Setup and type in Copilots, and it's going to bring up the Copilot option, and then this is the home page for all your Copilots. What you're seeing here is a list of Copilots that are going to be there in your org. Right now, we are in beta, so we only support 1 Copilot, but going forward, you will be able to create more Copilots depending on your need. So click on a particular Copilot in order to go to its detail page. And this detail page is going to show you what this Copilot does, a basic description, along with all the bunch of different actions it is capable of taking. These can be both standard and custom. And then you can also configure system messages, like what's the welcome message going to be? If there is an error, what's the standard message that we show saying, oops, there is an error? So that's something that you can configure. And on the top right, you can see a button called Open in Builder. Once you click that, it's going to open up what we call the builder interface or the Copilot builder. This lets you add custom actions to your Copilot, test your Copilot out, see how it behaves, and then roll it out to your users. Now, on the left-hand side, you're going to see a list of all the actions assigned to this Copilot, which means it is capable of taking these actions. And there is this whole action library that is made available to you. This is a list of all the actions that your org has. You can choose to add some of these to your Copilot or remove, and vice versa. It's your call. And on the right-hand side is a similar preview interface that we've been using so far. And what's interesting is the panel in between. So that is the planner interface. Whenever you put in a prompt, it's going to show you what's happening behind the scenes. What are the actions it has taken? That's what is going to be shown in the middle. So I've already done that. So the prompts that I have given in the UI, I've run it back here. And this is what is the planner interface showing me. So for my first prompt, that basically asks how many properties are closed this month. Notice the intent. It has understood the intent to be aggregation of properties. And then it has decided for this intent, this action is appropriate. It's a call that Copilot has taken on its own. And for that, this is the input that has been passed automatically. This is the result that this action has given us, which is what that is displayed to us. Similarly, when I give it a different question, it's going to again figure out the intent, and this time it has decided it has to fire the query records. Because even though my intention is to get the property, I want to show the property in the UI. So I query the records, and then the result is going to have a JSON representation of the S object, which is then going to be rendered this way. So this is what it looks like behind the scenes. Now, what we're going to do is add a bunch of custom actions. And to do this, we are going to look at 4 use cases today. And I'm going to show you the code behind all of these 4 different use cases. So the first use case, we are going to go with a simple one. So let's say I have a zip code, because I'm dealing with properties, and I want to understand which city this zip code belongs to. So this is something that I want to build and give this capability to Copilot. Now for that, what I have done is I've created an Apex class. I mean, there are multiple ways you can do this, but since this is a developer session, an Apex class. So within this Apex class, I have an invocable method. And if you've worked with invocable methods before, you know that invocable methods take in a single parameter of type list, and the return type is also of type list. But for our use case, I'm going to pass in a zip code, which is of type integer. And for every zip code that I pass, I'm going to get back the name of the city, which is a string. So that's basically what my invocable method is. Inside my method, I can write whatever business logic that I want. But here, what I'm doing is I'm making a call out to an external service, and I'm trying to get the city for this particular zip code. So a very simple invocable method. Now that I've created this method, how am I going to let Copilot know that such a method exists and it's able to invoke this method? So for that, what you create is Copilot Actions. Again, from setup, you can simply type Copilot Actions. You're going to come up to this particular interface, which shows a list of all the actions. And click on New Copilot Action to add a new action. These are the 3 options that are available, if you remember from the slides: Apex, Prompt Templates, and Flows. So let's choose Apex, and let's choose our Apex class that we created. And click Next. Now, what you see here is from the Apex class, it has figured out what are the inputs it needs and what are the outputs that the method gives out. It's also identified the data types. For example, the input was an integer, and the output is a string, which is of type text. Now, there are a bunch of different checkboxes. The first one, essentially for your input, it says whether this input is required, because Copilot needs to know that. And then we have another checkbox saying collect data from user. Now, it turns out not all the actions need data that is directly given from the user. Copilot is able to run some actions on its own, get data from the backend, and send it to your methods. But if it needs data from the user, like in the chat window, if a user is expected to type something, that's when you check this box for that input. And now going to the outputs, one important checkbox here is show in conversation. So this actually denotes if this output is showable in the conversation panel. So not all outputs need to be shown. For example, if your method returns a record ID or a JSON string, you wouldn't want to show that to your users. So in that case, this would be unchecked. And that's not all. Actually, all of you would have ignored, or most of you would have ignored those white boxes, because personally, even when I create fields and objects, I ignore the descriptions. But in the case of Copilot, that is the most important field that you need to fill out, because that is the field that tells Copilot what this action can do. And you need to be pretty descriptive, because Copilot is like a baby. You need to give it all the information it needs. So I've already done that for this action, and this is how it's going to look like. So for the zip code, I'm saying this is an action that gets the name of the city corresponding to a zip code. And I'm also giving it some sample queries, like sample utterances that the user is going to give. I'm going to give that as well. And for every input, let me zoom in a bit if it's difficult to see. So for every input parameter, I'm also defining what that parameter is. In this case, I'm saying it's a zip code, and it's typically going to be a 5 or 6 digit number. So as much information as you can, you will need to provide Copilot. In the case of output, I'm saying it is just a city name that corresponds to the zip code. So this is the level of detail that you need to put into the descriptions in order for Copilot to understand when to invoke your action. So this is all you need to do. Create your class, create a Copilot action, give descriptions, and then back in our Copilot builder, you can go to the action library, find your action, and assign it to the Copilot. Right now, my Copilot is activated, so I won't be able to change anything, but it's already added because you can see it in here, get city for zip code. Let's now fire up this prompt saying, what's the city for 94016, and see what happens. So behind the scenes, again, the Copilot's planner is running, and it's able to figure out, based on the description I have given, that a certain action has to be executed. It's going to look at this conversation to find out if all the inputs are given or not. In this case, I'm supplying the input already, like 94016. So from the question, it figured out the zip code is this, and the action has run with this output, which is then shown to me. It's as simple as that. Cool, you're following with me so far? Perfect. So now, this was the simple use case 1. Now let's go to use case number 2, which is, I'm looking at properties. I like a property, and I want to visit that property. In order to visit that property, I need to know when can I go and do that. So for that, I need to query all the visit slots that are available for a given property. For that, I have defined another invocable method, but this time, the parameter is going to be the Salesforce ID of a property. And for each Salesforce ID, I'm returning a list of string, which is a list of time slots that is available for each property. So that's my invocable method. Like I said, whatever is happening inside the method is up to you. We are only concerned about the property types and the return types. Now, for this action, this is the Copilot action that I have created. Again, a description and sample prompts. But what's interesting is the input. The input this time is a property ID, and it is required for me to fetch the slots. But ID is not something that I will collect from the user. Like, no user would type in an 18-digit ID into the chat window. So they would ideally type in a property name or something like that. So in this case, what Copilot can do behind the scenes is, based on the name, it's able to figure out what is the record ID. It knows this action needs a record ID, so it's going to fire up that action before that. So this is what we call action chaining. So Copilot is able to do that. But we don't want to leave anything to chance. It's a baby, so we need to be very prescriptive. So we are telling it, run the identify record by name action immediately before this. So the more prescriptive you are, the more reliable your outcome is going to be. So here I'm very prescriptive. I'm saying, to get the ID, do this. And the output, of course, this time if you see, it's going to be of a type list. And now, once I add this to the Copilot and run it, it's going to look something like this. All I need to type in is find visit slots to Victorian Villa, which happens to be one of my properties. It's gone back, it's run the standard action with Victorian Villa, and then it got a record ID back, which is then sent to my property ID. And then I got a list of time slots back, and then it's shown in the UI. So that's how chaining of actions works behind the scenes. So that was use case 2. Now use case 3 is going to be a logical next step. What would you do once you know that there is a slot available? You would go ahead and book that slot. So for that, I have created one more action. Now this time, if you notice the parameters, there is a wrapper class. Now, why is it a wrapper class? We know that invocable actions can only take in a single parameter. But in order to book a slot, you don't just need the property ID, you need the property ID along with what slot you're looking to book. So it's 2 parameters that you need to send. That's not something invocable method can do, so we create a wrapper class, which in turn has those 2 properties that you need. And with these, I'm going to write my own business logic. I'm creating an event over here and returning that event back. So my return type is going to be an object this time. Okay, so again, a simple method that takes in a wrapper this time with 2 properties inside the wrapper class. Now, once I add this to the Copilot Actions, because it's a wrapper class, it automatically knows what are the properties that wrapper class has, and it shows both of them to me. And again, I give descriptions, but the most interesting description here is going to be this. So remember from my previous example, when I fetch the time slots, the time slot is a string. It just says 10th March at 4 p.m., which is understood by humans. But if you've been working with Apex, you know the date time in Apex is an IOC string in a particular format, YYYY, MMDD. So here, in the instructions, I'm telling Copilot, whatever input it receives, convert it to this format, and only then send it to my action. So all of that in just one single line. I did not write any code for that. No need to Google for date.format, all of that, not required. Just put in the statement, Copilot can do it. And the output is of record info type, and everything else is almost the same. I just wanted to highlight that one bit. So now that you've created this action, let's see how it works. So I found the slots. So this time, let me put in a prompt saying, book the second one. So from the conversation context, I'm expecting Copilot to already know that I have to book a slot at Victorian Villa because I've already queried for Victorian Villa, and I've received slots, and out of that, I want to book the second slot. So that's what I wanted to do. So it's figured that out. So it's booked the second slot of 13th March at 12 p.m. Because the return type is an event object from my Apex method, there is a card that is automatically displayed. So all of that is handled for you. So this was a nice little use case, but will your users always follow this pattern? Will they always say find slots, and then they look at slots, and then they say book slots? Can you control your users that way? You can't. So what if your user just puts in this prompt saying, book the next available slot at a different place, which is Quiet Retreat? So Copilot is now going to go back. It knows I'm going to look at Quiet Retreat. It's going to go back and find the slots because it knows for this it needs to find the slots. And if you remember, there is an array of slots that is returned. I said book the next available one. So it's automatically going to take the first one in the array and book the slot. So the key takeaway of this particular demo is that all you can do is build actions. And how these actions are chained together, how these actions work together is all very dynamic. It depends on what your user is asking and what the co-planner has planned for that particular action. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So to wrap this off with a fourth use case, I have a very simple one here. Let's see how this is done. So here I have a very simple prompt where I ask, what are the landmarks near Victorian Villa? So typically I'm expecting it will show me universities, it will show me rivers, lakes, where I can go and hang out, chill, stuff like that. Now for something like this, by this time I've shown you 3 Apex classes. Now you know there is an Apex class behind this. And whenever I'm talking about landmarks and places, the best API to use is Google. So let's say I make a call out to Google and get the list of landmarks. But any API would be returning data in a JSON format. Now, how did I get that JSON to be summarized this way? If I would have plugged in the action directly to Copilot, Copilot would have gotten that JSON, and will it display that JSON here? It doesn't really make sense. That's where prompt templates are going to be effective. So what I've done here is, instead of plugging in my Apex action directly to Copilot, I have plugged it into a prompt template. So here I've created a prompt template, gave it some context, saying that you're so-and-so, working for so-and-so company, and this is a list of landmarks for a property. I want you to summarize this list of landmarks. So this is how you create a basic prompt template, nothing much very fancy here. But what you can do is create a Copilot action from this prompt template. So essentially, in that list of drop-down, I selected Apex before. I would have selected prompt template, and it's going to show me input-output exactly the same. But prompt templates are going to have predefined outputs. In this case, it's going to be your prompt response. So what really happened behind the scenes is when I made this query, it has fired the prompt template. The prompt template, in turn, fired my Apex action, received the JSON data, processed that JSON data, and sent the prompt response back to me. So that is our fourth use case. And in a nutshell, or in 15 minutes, how you can work with Copilot actions. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. As you've seen, there are different combinations that you can do. Like prompt templates are capable of executing both Apex and flows. Flows can in turn execute Apex. So you can mix and match depending on your use case. What you want is something that you need to figure out. But we have some tips for you in terms of what you need to keep in mind when we are building these custom Copilot actions, because there's a lot of possibilities. So that's something that I would like Gary to cover.
Yeah. Thank you, Aditya. Amazing demo. All right. So first, and I think Aditya touched on many of these points, but it's good to actually repeat them so that you're already aware of this. First is you should ask yourself the question, should this experience exist in Copilot? Like right now, GenAI is very sexy. There is a tendency of like putting everything in GenAI and so on. But generally speaking, you need to really ask you, okay, I have a new use case. I have a feedback about one of my users that want to do something in Salesforce, and I can develop something for him. Should I put that in Copilot or not? And the question here can be answered simply by, should it be a conversation? Is there a value to have a conversation against that use case? The second thing here is also, how many clicks are you going to replace? If it's to replace one click, honestly, don't put that action in Copilot. Just code it directly. If you are going to replace 12 clicks, like a little bit the story of like, hey, I want to book the next available slot. Okay, that was multiple actions behind the scene. It was one request for the user, and it was super fast to give the answer. So that's the first thing you should keep in mind. Second item, you should think about like when designing actions. We have actually implemented Copilot on our own Salesforce org. And what we did first was we went completely vanilla. We are like, okay, we are going to implement this tool just using the standard actions that are provided there. And we are going to see how customers or our users are reacting, essentially. This is important because like this, you can start having your users understanding what's feasible or not. They will use summarization, they will use drafting email, and so on. And after a while, you can be, okay, the summary I'm getting is probably not exactly using what I want as custom object. Maybe I have on the opportunity or things like this. So then you can tweak it. And so my advice would be start with the standard actions, and then after a while, start customizing them. Like if you want to customize the summarize action, it's as simple as creating a new prompt template and adjusting it to your need. So that would be the second part. It's like, hey, just see what standard action you can use and customize them a bit further. If really this is not getting you where you want to be, then you have custom action. Just create the action from scratch and do, like, for example, a call to an external API. Or cover use cases that would be very much linked to your own business strategy and business processes. The last piece is description. I think I'm doing the same as Aditya. Every time I'm creating a field, flow, or whatever in Salesforce, I never described anything because I knew that I was never going to get anyone reading it. But the thing, though, is that now someone, or more like something, is reading it. And so the LLM is going to use this description to pick up the action or not. So this is extremely, extremely important. As you can see, you could even put instruction in this description. That's going to be where you are going to lose sometimes the most amount of time, because sometimes it's really a lot of back and forth of like, I'm adding a new action. I thought I was describing it correctly and that the planner would pick it up, but then I see that it's picking it up over like a few utterances, a few prompts, but not all of them. And then you start tweaking a bit your description further. Keep in mind as well that our recommendation here is, generally speaking, for any action that you are building, have around 30 utterances, 30 questions that you would be saying, okay, if I'm asking this question, I want that action to be picked up. Why? Because like this, you can develop your custom action, assign it to the Copilot, test your utterances, and see if it's indeed doing what you want, at least on 30 questions. After that, you don't have to test more because, generally speaking, if these 30 are working, the rest will work. Also keep in mind, if you add a custom action, it might be that some questions that were asked before are going to be answered differently. So if you ask, hey, can you summarize a deal, and you have still the summarize action standard, it's going to use that summarization action. But if you have another action that is saying, oh, summarization of this custom object, I'm using something very custom, you could literally change and tweak the description there so that one of the two actions is being picked with the different description or the different questions. So that's extremely important. An example of a prompt there, and by the way, when you go in Einstein Copilot Action, you can literally see the description we have added for our standard action. But an example here is the summarize record action. You see that we are pretty descriptive about what it's doing, example of what customers would ask, and so on and so on. So Copilot is available now, so go and have a try. There is a lot of workshops that are happening right now at TDX, so go and do them. And there is also tons of resources, so I'll give you a little bit of time there to scan this QR code. We have blog posts, release notes, trails that you can take, and we'll add more and more resource against all the information we have for Copilot.
So one quick thing, those of you here and also those of us watching us online, on Trailhead, we also have a trial org being provisioned for Copilot and Prompt Builder. It's going to be valid for 5 days. So scan this QR code, you're going to be taken to the relevant modules or projects rather, hands-on projects that you can actually try out. So everything that I told you today, you can actually try it out on a trial org on Trailhead today.
Yeah, this is extremely important to know. And honestly, it's very cool to test Copilot. Like the first time I could literally tweak Copilot and how it was behaving, I was pretty happy about it. So have a try and tell us the feedback. Like, hey, do you like it? Don't you like it? What should we do? And so on. Last but not least, there are a couple of sessions that are still being organized right now over the next 2 days. There is also the Einstein Lookout, and as I was saying, the hands-on workshop that you can go and participate in to directly use, like kind of somebody teaching you how to use Copilot during the workshop. And with that, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to us.